Hello, and welcome to Sid's Baked Goods. Today we're going to be making meat pie. We're going to be making 4 meat pies. So let's get started with the pie shell. Now this is a covered pie, so make sure that you adjust the recipe to have enough dough to cover it and to do the bottom. That'll be about 6 recipes that are in the description below, or 1.5, or probably closer to 1 1/3 recipes in the description below per pie. After you get the butter and flour together with a little bit of salt, rub it in. Make sure everything's cold. You want everything to be ice cold. You don't want to melt the butter too much. That's what gets it flaky. So now we're going to add the eggs, water together, and then add that into our flour mixture. Now, I'm using ice cold water, so remember that. Don't be using warm water. It's not going to work as well. So once I get these in, mix up those eggs. Make sure they're nice and mixed before I start mixing them into my flour. And then I'll just slowly mix everything in until it starts to form a ball. Once it starts to form a ball, there's still going to be lots of flour just miscellaneous out of it, but that's okay. You got most of it into a ball. You can take it out, especially if you have a large amount. If you have a small amount, you probably can still finish it in your bowl. But if you have a large amount like I do, take it out of the bowl and just slowly start kneading it. Make sure not to over knead it, just until everything sticks together. So just like this. Still a little bit that's not sticking, but that's okay. Just perfect as it is. There we go. Just gonna make sure I sweep up all this stuff so I can add it back in. There we go. Then I'm gonna roll this out so to make it easier to cut. Now I have to cut 8 pieces. 4 for the tops, 4 for the bottoms. Make sure your 4 bottoms are bigger than your tops because you need more dough for that. So what I'm going to do is cut it in half and then cut them into 4s. The ones that are closest to the middle will be perfect for the bottoms, and the ones to the outside will be perfect for the tops, since the outside normally is a bit smaller when you roll it out, because it's not a perfect rectangle. There we go. So those outside 4 will be my tops, and the inside 4 will be my bottoms. Now all we have to do is form it into a bit of a disc, and then put it in the fridge for minimum half an hour. It's even better if you put it in there for a full hour. I'm doing this at lunchtime, so I'm gonna keep it in there for 5-6 hours before I actually finish them. So now that I have all 8, put them in your fridge and you're good to go. Now let's get on to our meat pie, the filling. So we're going to put a little bit of oil in there. Now my meat pies are turkey and beef mixture, 1/2 pound and 1/2 pound. And since I'm making 4, I'm going to need 2 pounds turkey, 2 pounds beef. And you can decide what meat you want, obviously. Just remember you need 1 pound of meat. Now once I got all 4 in there, I'm going to just mix it up. Make sure I get all of that in there. I'm obviously having a clean surface, so if anything spills I can put it back in. But if anything's dirty and it spills out, just throw it away. It's not going to make a big difference if it's just a tiny piece here, a tiny piece there. But just make sure you work clean and have a clean workstation so that you can put it back in if something big falls out. Now we're going to season the meat with some pepper and salt. That's it. We're not going to put any spices in the meat, just salt and pepper. And this is always to taste. So I know generally how much I want. So I put what I put in and then I'll taste it once it's cooked. Now that it's cooked, I've tasted it. It turned out what I put in was fine. The thing is, you're gonna also salt and pepper and season your vegetables. So just be careful that you don't over season your meat. All that liquid that's in there, make sure you remove most of it. Not all of it, because you still want some juices. But you want to get rid of most of that liquid because it's a lot of fat. And if you put too much liquid into your pie shell, it's going to make it soggy and boil over, and it can become a real big mess. So now onto our vegetables. We're going to dice up some onions and garlic. Then we're going to spice those. We're going to sweat those. And then once those are sweat, we're going to add in our celery, potatoes, and carrots. And then simmer with some chicken stock till it's just a little bit of how do you say it? It's al dente, but it's kind of like when you take a bite and there's a little bit of pushback, but it's still very soft. So once these onions are chopped, I'll get onto the garlic. Make sure you have all your vegetables prepped before you start cooking. You don't want to be cutting your carrots, your celery, your potatoes while your onions are sweating because you might burn them. So just make sure everything's prepped beforehand, then move on to cooking. So with garlic, you want to smash it first. It makes it a lot easier to mince them. And it also brings out the flavor too, because all the juices start to come out. Then we're just going to dice until they're all nice and small, and then add them in. This could take a while. Take your time. Just make sure it's as thick as you want it to be. Those are nicely minced. Let's add them in. Make sure you get all of it off your hands and the knife. Then we're going to add the spices. Nice pinch of allspice and nutmeg. Then quite a bit of cinnamon. This gives it a nice warm feeling when you eat it, which is really nice. So I'm going to just put that over by the stove while I start prepping the rest of the vegetables. First we're going to do the celery, then we're going to move on to the carrots and potatoes. Be very careful with everything. Get rid of the excess parts that are gone bad. We don't want to use terrible products, we want to have good products. And we're going to cut them nice and thick so that you get a bite of them instead of some mush with your meat. You want to have a nice big chunks. The reason why we dice our onions and garlic is because we want that flavor to be out throughout your thing, which you want it to be nice and small so it can be everywhere for every bite you take. But you don't want it to be mush. That's why we add in the carrots, potatoes, and celery to give it a bit of a mouthful instead of eating soup. So we're just going to cut these carrots into manageable pieces. Always remember, cut for comfort. If you need to cut them to be super small because you're worried you're going to cut yourself, cut them super small. It might take longer, but it's safer for you. So I'm going to just cut them into this size and then again nice big chunks. And then finish the rest of them. If you have to cut one carrot at a time, don't be embarrassed. It's all about safety. And practice will make sure that you can do more later on. So these potatoes, nice russet potatoes I like to use. They're a nice size. I like the flavor from them. Now with potatoes, because there's the round ends and the non-round ends, you want to make sure that you stack the round ends on top and have all the flat ends on the bottom so that it's nice and sturdy when you're cutting instead of wobbly. You don't want to ever cut yourself. There we go. Nice big chunks. Now we're going to go over to our onions and garlic. There we go. Add a little oil. And turn it on high. Once it starts sweating, just have it nice and mixed up. I forgot to mention, there's also a bay leaf in here. Make sure you remember what your bay leaf looks like, because it's basically wood. If you bite into that, you're just eating wood, essentially, and it's not a pleasant feeling. It's just awful. So make sure you know what your bay leaves look like so that you can take them out and make sure no one eats it in the pie. Like, it would be terrible to ever keep it in at an actual bakery, let alone at home. So once those onions have sweat, mix in the vegetables and just give it a nice little stir before we add in the chicken stock. There we go. Now add in the chicken stock. Remember, I'm making 4 pies, so if you're only making 1 pie, it's going to be a quarter of everything that I've done so far. Now once it starts to boil, turn it down to simmer, and then you can start seasoning with your salt and pepper. And remember, you salt and peppered your meat, so don't over salt and pepper your vegetables. Make sure they complement each other. And this is all up to you too. Same with the other spices too, like the allspice, nutmeg, and cinnamon. It's all up to you. You're doing it to taste. I just put down in the recipe what I prefer. But definitely salt and pepper is to taste, because sometimes you have good vegetables that don't need a lot of flavor boosted from the salt, so maybe you need to put less salt in one week, but later on your carrots are getting a bit older or your celery is getting a bit older and you need a little bit more salt to bring out the flavor. But remember, salt is just to bring out the flavor. It's not supposed to get that salty taste. And then obviously same with the pepper. And always taste test. Oh, you don't like it? Add whatever you think you need. If you think it's too salty, you can add a bit more water. If you think you need more salt, add more salt. If you think more pepper, more pepper. Simple. And always use 2 spoons, especially if you're in a bakery. Now, if you're just doing this at home, I'm sure you understand that you're going to eat this anyways. But for bakery purpose, you don't want to be putting your bacteria in it or anything like that. So while that simmers for probably 40 minutes or so, I'm going to start getting the pie shells done. Make sure you're using your bigger pieces. If you don't know which ones are your bigger pieces, mark them before you put them in your fridge so that's easier. Once they get fully rolled out, try and put it on your thing. Yeah, well, don't mess up like me. If you have a nice pie shell, like if you're doing this at home and you have a glass one, you'll never have to worry about that. But since this is for like a takeout, bring it up to the top, make sure it's over top of it, then roll it down. Then you fix it. Simple. If only I did that first. just because the tin itself is super light, it just pushes it all over the place. If you're doing this at home, I recommend a glass one. I love the glass dishes, or they're really nice. Or even just the plain old tin, it's fine. Now, you can cut this with a knife. I don't recommend it because you get jagged cuts and it's a lot more dangerous, but you can still do it. So it's just going to look like that, and we're going to move on to the next one. But just remember, keep your excess, and you can use a knife, but again, I recommend using scissors. Scissors work a lot better, and you'll see that I'm only using the knife because I forget about the scissors until later on. So we're going to roll this out again, just like the last one. Roll it onto your tin, over top of it, because the tin is light. If just adjust it a little bit if you went over too much on one side. Press everything into the walls. You want to make sure that it covers the whole thing. You don't want to have pockets of air underneath your pie. And this is when I remember, hey, scissors are a good idea. So I just go and grab the scissors. And remember, scissors work way better, but they're still very dangerous if you're not paying attention. So make sure you're paying attention. But they're still safer than a knife. So just like the last one, make sure it's all covered in. And once we are done with all these, we're going to put them into the fridge to cool while we finish off the filling. There we go. Now on to the third one. Same old, same old. Now this time though, I remember the scissors, so we'll start using that right away instead of last time. There we go. If you are having troubles figuring out how much you have to roll it out, put your tin onto your rolled out dough and see the size. If it's close, perfect, put it on. If it's not, keep rolling. There we go. And now I go check on the vegetables, and they're perfectly done. Always taste test the potatoes. They're the biggest pieces. So if they're done, everything is done. Now, this is very important. There's a lot of liquid in here. You need to remove your bay leaves, so you need to find it. And, like I just said, there's a lot of liquid. So be careful with that. If you're doing one pie recipe, the amount of liquid will boil down because you have to boil it for 10 minutes. And if you're using 250 mils, 10 minutes of boiling will reduce it to like 150. But if you're using a whole liter, for example, for 4 pies, it's only going to reduce it to 850 or 900, which is not at all the same liquid for 1 pie to 4 pies. So, if you need to, remove some liquid from it, just pour it into a jar or something and use it later, or use it for a soup or something like that. But make sure you get rid of it if there's too much. Now remember what your bay leaves look like, toss them, and then just mix in your vegetables and meat together. Make sure they're all nice mixed so that you get a nice mixture throughout your pie instead of just getting all veggie and all meat in different pies. And again, remember, if you think there's too much liquid, just remove some. You don't want soggy pie. So we're just going to slowly scoop these in. Make sure you fill each pie evenly, just like so. I realized later on that, hey, maybe I should be using a ladle instead of spatula. But that's neither here or there. There we go. Now, you want to press it down because you don't want too much air within this pie. So you want to press it down and be nice and flat so that when you cover it, it's nice and even throughout the whole thing. You want each slice to be the same slice from one side of the pie to the other. Now on to covering it. Now these are the smaller pieces, so you don't need to roll them out as much. You just need to be able to cover the whole pie. And the reason why we're adding an extra few inches off the ends of the pie tin is so that we can push the top and the bottom together and then fold them inwards to get a nice large handle for your pie. So we're going to egg wash to the outside, just like so. Gonna put the top on. Cut the excess off. Then we're going to fold the glued pieces together upwards to make a nice crust. So just like so, folding them upwards. This also seals it very nicely so nothing can escape. And then we're going to crimp it with our thumb and pointer and our knuckle. So, pointer, finger, and thumb, just like so. And push them just like that. And that gives you nice big crimps. I like this design. You can crimp it any way you want, really. It's up to you. But this is how I like to do it. So you're just going to crimp, crimp, crimp all the way around. And with having so much dough, because you've had two pieces stuck together and folded it over, you can get nice big crimps that look beautiful. Almost done. I'm only going to show you this pie. It's the same exact thing for the next 4. There's no problem, so I didn't keep any of the footage. If any problem does happen in future videos, when I'm doing large batches, I will show you the mistakes because I want to make sure that you understand how to fix mistakes when they happen, okay? But these pies all ended up being the same. I like to make a little star design in the middle. There's no real mistakes, so you don't need to watch me make all 4 pies. It's the same exact thing. Make sure you open up the holes so that they look nice. Just like that. Perfect. Now that we have all 4, we egg wash the whole top, get that beautiful shine. Make sure you're not putting like a full egg on each one because you don't want scrambled eggs on top. You just want the shine. Make sure you get those crimps well egged too. Be careful with the crimps because the crimps like to hold a bunch of egg, which could actually make scrambled eggs around the whole thing. So just be careful on that when you're doing it. Also, make sure you only egg wash when you're about to put them in. If you if you egg wash early, it's gonna make your dough soggy and could ruin it. So we're gonna put it in for an hour at 350 convection. And then it's done. I found out later that I did have a little too much liquid. I should have removed probably 100 mils or 200 mils of liquid from the vegetables. Because as I take these out, you'll start to see some of the liquid boiled out of it. Remember, don't remove all the liquid because then it'll just be super dry. But if you look, there's some liquid coming out of the holes. And that's a bit of a problem, but if you remove 100 mils, it would have not have been a problem. So this is how they turned out, looking beautiful. If you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I even have my own website. Thank you, and have a nice day.